call a little early because you're not feeling well. That's okay.
So I got the call flash early.
I know you're not feeling well. I'm
It's
trying to be
not-
understanding.
Wait, what did you say? We're leaving?
Yeah. I got it. Who put it there? Oh, good job, Holmes. Looks good.
Yeah.
Doing anything? Huh? You drive? Driving up.
I'm in such bad shape that I was driving up here and I'm almost up here and I said, man, I forgot my glasses. I go, how am I gonna do class without my glasses? And it was too late to drive back. And then I remembered I had like another pair of like glasses inside my bag. And then I get out of the parking lot and I had my glasses in the back seat actually. So I have no idea how they got there, but they got there. Welcome to our last session of the year. And for some of you, the last session of the program. So for those of you who have endured 1 year or more of torture, congratulations. Almost. You're almost there. So, it being 10 o'clock, bids are due. Has everyone submitted their bid?
Oh, kind of.
Come on.
And he was sitting right there.
I was sitting there. I just didn't know that it was supposed to be.
Yeah, say something in Spanish. It might help you page.
Por favor.
I know what that means.
Daddy, please.
Yeah, I heard daddy in there.
I didn't. That's all I got.
Please.
Oh, please.
Okay. Those of you who were here, Dr. Forgy asked that we let him know when we've got about 30 minutes to go in the session today so he can come in and take a camera. My sense would be that we'll finish earlier today, okay? I don't have much new material to cover with you today. More so a review of what we've gone through the session and, free to exchange ideas or, review any information that you have any doubts about.
Do we have to turn that on or that?
It's on.
Come on, man, this guy's on it. He's on it.
Oh, man, it's bad.
I guess what I'd like is if there are a couple of you, I know there are a couple of you that went on the trip this weekend, if maybe you want to share with some of your classmates what transpired and maybe to either encourage them to go on the next one or to avoid it at all costs. Does anybody have any thoughts?
I would love to, we gonna maybe pass around some things, you know.
Come up.
Do a little 5-minute presentation. Do a PowerPoint.
You like extra points for this.
Where's the Prezi?
I don't know. Where's the Prezi?
You didn't prepare it.
You didn't prepare our Prezi for you.
See ya.
Okay, so our trip, we went to Key West, Cayman Islands, and then Cozumel. And I guess we didn't really know what we were gonna run into. We supposed we were gonna see some developments, and we did cover a lot about sustainability and like the environmental issues. We even got a tour of the cruise that we were on. It was Carnival Freedom. And so I'll pass around some things that we did, because to me, even though I've never been to Key West, I don't think I took away enough from Key West as much as I did from the Cayman Islands, because who took the class for August class? The August class with Kevin? He works there, and so he let us talk to the developers that he works with. He's an advisor for that company. And Dustin could probably tell you like numbers and figures and things like that, but I was just too amazed at just actually being there in the presence of somebody who worked on that island for the longest. And so I'm passing around some flyers from developments that he did.
With what do you call those things?
The dog.
No.
Stingrays.
The
The stingrays?
The ones
No.
that killed the crocodile guy.
You know, the excursions weren't part of our The excursions weren't part of our trip, so if you think you're gonna go on the cruise or something later on the next time around he does it, and you're gonna go and skydive or something like that, it's not that. It is nonstop information, in contact with people who matter, who make a difference, who make the comprehensive plans for developers who are involved in that process, historical backgrounds of the places that you're gonna go to. And then hopefully if you give Dr. Forgy some more ideas, and then maybe you guys can get on to that. So like, let's say, oh, you know you're gonna go to the Cayman Islands and there's a specific development that you want to, you know, have a background and investigate, then you can go and do that. We actually went to a university in Mexico, in Cozumel, and we had set up an interview with a doctor there who publishes studies on the environmental sustainability and the tourism side of that, like how do they sustain tourism in that island and the environment, like the effects that that has on the environment there. But we couldn't actually speak to him, so we had to impromptu grab a few students, and I was translating somewhat.
Nice.
You know, but they're really smart and bright, resilient students. We got a hold of the student body president, and so he took us around the university, even led us into the studies that they have published, the university has published there in Mexico. And so even though we didn't get to talk to the professor, there's actually a lot of conferences going on. At the time, I found out from the taxi driver, there's a lot of conferences going on right now on environmental issues and sustainability there. So he was heavily involved with that, and he couldn't come out to speak to us. So the students did a pretty good job, even though that wasn't their field of study, to be able to inform us on that. So that was pretty interesting. So besides going on a cruise, you know, you're gonna go on a cruise and you're gonna hang out on the cruise. It was nonstop information all the time, and related to real estate development, making it more of a global point of view than just local. And then what I took away the most of it was the fact that when you're here, there's a lot of development going on, but you drive past it and you're kind of like closed-minded to it, but going somewhere and just, you want to take it in. You want to see what's different about it. So that was like the best takeaway from the whole entire program. On top of that, putting everything together and being able to ask a professional developer intelligent questions. Dustin did a really good job at that, keeping him talking. And I can't say much about the water or the food.
You didn't go in the water or have any of the food?
Of course I had water and I had food, but I can't say that it was that great.
All right.
Was worthwhile? Would you recommend it?
I would definitely recommend it, but you have to take control of it. So don't wait until Dr. Forgy sets up everything and you just kind of fall into the program. Do your background, ask for, you know, sources that way. Like, I know I really wanted to ask questions about the development. Had I gone in with a background knowledge of who he was or who we were going to speak with, it would have been better, because I've been more quick.
What's the most popular thing that's being built? I mean, where's the money?
Resorts, it's all tourism. They're little islands. So that's what they do the most. And infrastructure to support the development.
Like, I was noticing, is a hospital being built?
There is a hospital being built, actually. I don't know if Dr. Forgy is going to post our blog entries on the trip, but there is, the developer that we sat with, he had banked on a lot of land with the intent of building a port or developing a port.
Okay.
But he had neighborhood opposition to where it didn't go through.
Guys.
So, that being said, there was an Indian doctor who performs heart surgeries in
Indian, like with a
no, not a native.
or like an East
Not a
Indian.
native.
He was doing like a tourism hospital.
Yeah, it was tourism.
Sri Lanka.
Medical tourism is the thing, but the way that he practices the heart surgeries in assembly line format
What?
is what he's has renowned, you know.
Oh, don't get sick. That's what you said.
No, it's like when people go to Canada to get medicine because they don't have the medical here.
So
Go there.
what you're saying? There's schools in Mexico?
Yes, they are educated. They are really. You know,
No.
if you don't travel, you're gonna think that everybody else in the rest of the world is stupid and not educated.
Not really.
But they
That's an
really,
American thing. That's
but
not
they
a general
really
thing.
are.
Hold on, with all due respect, we're probably some of the least educated people in the world in this country.
No, I'm saying if you don't travel, you don't see.
No, that's an
You
American
think.
thing. You're the only ones who think that. Nobody else thinks that.
Things what?
That we all live in trees and nobody's educated because we're not American. That's
That's
not
all right.
true.
Because we're
Everybody
country-centric.
doesn't think
They
that.
did say
Okay,
Jamaica was.
I'm gonna take control of this class. Enough of this. I don't care about trees and things like that. I just care, would you recommend, you would recommend it to the
Absolutely,
students? And
yeah.
you would recommend it, so it was worthwhile?
Yeah.
Any additional takeaways you'd like to share with the class?
I mean, the biggest thing I got out of it was on the sustainability front, you know, Key West is really doing it out of necessity. Because they have limited resources, they get their water from Homestead. So they have to do it. And it's a big initiative they're pushing out. Somewhere like Grand Cayman, they don't necessarily have to do it yet. But they're starting to recognize the fact that they need to start doing something. The other big thing too was, you know, how pro-development Cayman Islands is. And it's a very good spot to do development because it's owned by the UK. It's very stable. It's a big financial center. And somewhere like Cozumel, which is now I'm not going to say unstable, but it's a little bit more of an unknown. You just don't see a lot of development going on there. And they actually said about Jamaica, you know, the difference between the Cayman Islands and Jamaica was Jamaica voted to be independent from the UK, and that's why they've had so many difficulties, whereas the Cayman Islands voted to stay with the UK, and it's been just a much more stable.
Let me ask a question. Was the impact of natural disasters and hurricanes, because both the Caymans and their infrastructure and hotel or tourism industry and Cozumel have been severely impacted over the last decade. Was that discussed at all on the trip?
It was, and Cayman Islands actually follow the South Florida Building Code, so it's the same exact permitting process and inspection. Cozumel, we didn't really get a chance to talk to. All we did in Cozumel was went to the university and did like an ecotourism resort.
I know the last time I was in Cozumel, it was 2 years past the last storm, and it was still, the dock wasn't redone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot to get, just stop to think the construction process, the sourcing. There are plenty of people in South Florida that make a living out of sourcing material for development projects in the Caribbean. Because if you're in the Caymans, where do you get your rebar from? You know, I mean, they don't,
Yeah, everything's important.
everything's brought in. Where do you get your furniture from? You know, where do you get your glazing from, right?
But there is no taxes there. There's no real estate taxes, no income tax. So it's about the same. They import most of their labor. So if you import a labor, like if you import a maid, you have to pay a work permit of say $200. But if you import a skilled carpenter, those permits are $4,000, or if you import an executive, it could be $30,000.
Oh,
What are they majoring on? They majoring on hotels or selling condos or
What, in Cozumel?
in Cayman?
What do you mean, what are they majoring? What are they building?
Yeah.
Well, this particular developer, he was doing like big mixed-use projects. Like he was doing a golf course with housing and a hotel. He was building this like medical city where another company had come and built a hospital, and they're just doing, you know, the development around it. But he primarily in the past was doing condo hotels. Everybody condo.
Did you all get like a sense of cost there? Like what?
It's a, yeah, well, since there is no taxes,
There are no taxes.
there are no taxes. There, what they do have to pay taxes on are imports, so they have the tariff, and that's about 10 to 15%. So that does increase the construction cost, and also the labor that they have to bring in. So overall, those two items increase at about 40%, but then since you don't have,
So you'll say it's about 40%
more to
more
build
to
there.
build there than
Yeah.
you would build building.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell you, generally speaking, I think in most parts of the Caribbean, it's much more expensive
Yeah.
to build.
And a lot of things come assembled.
right.
Okay.
So when they do like fit outs for commercial spaces, it'll be, you know, in a box, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you build the the interior, so it's built somewhere else and then they carried it.
Curiously, I wish I knew more about it. I have really the son of a friend of mine is, guys, bids are closed. Bids are closed. They were closed at 10, sorry. So the son of a friend of mine is an architect in Spain, and a friend of his mother's Filipino, and so Filipinos can only build in the Philippines. So you have to, have some sort of nationality or link in order to own land, in order to develop. And this kid's a surfer, so his mother bought him a parcel of land on one of these out islands, and he's building a surfing, resort.
Right.
And my friend's son is designing it. And it's, so how do you build in the middle of nowhere? And so, there's no running water. How do you import stuff in? There's no airport there. Everything comes by ferry. So they've had to, what he's gone back to is study what are local building practices. Going back to, whether it's wood or whatever, and use whatever is available locally to reduce the cost. Because, at the end of the day, they had like $300,000 to build these bungalows. And all they needed was a place for people to sleep. But when you're on an island, the cost of things is very expensive. When I was in graphic arts, we would print a fair amount of material to ship to Puerto Rico. And you'd say, Puerto Rico's a pretty developed economy, 4.5 million people. You've got an industry that had large printing companies, but we could compete with the people locally. Because at the end of the day, they had to import all their paper, they had to import all their ink, they had to import all their machinery. And they had a horrible tax structure there, and they were highly inefficient, because in Puerto Rico, you don't work on Friday. Did you know that?
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Viernes social.
No.
You go out late Thursday night. You've never heard Viernes social? You go out late Thursday night, and you stumble into work whenever on Friday. Before you know it, it's lunchtime. Don't ever have an appointment in Puerto Rico on a Friday.
It will not happen.
It will not happen. So I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm not. I'm not. So anyway. Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad. It seems like it was productive. It seems to me as if more people went. It could even be more so. And I think from my perspective, I wish it were at a different time of the year when I could get away, because I would definitely enjoy, participating and learning in that as well. So I'm sure their experiences, at the end of the day, we start to think about it. You're on the ship for X number of hours with people, and you're focused in what you're doing. You're taking a tremendous amount of knowledge out of there. So I'm sure it's well worthwhile. And those of you continuing the program, I would encourage you to sign up for the next one. Apologies. A couple of things. I don't know, but I would imagine that you would have received by now an email from somewhere at NOVA encouraging you to do evaluations on classes. And so, as I've encouraged you in the past, you've been my favorite class. No, listen, you say whatever, it doesn't really matter. I think what's important is that you take the time. As I've gotten older, I try to respond to surveys. I don't respond to everyone. Every time these dialogue boxes pop up, I don't respond to it necessarily. But if you don't provide feedback, positive or constructive, things don't change. Okay, so it is important for the program office, it's important for Dr. Forgy, and it's important for me to receive feedback, right? And if we're focusing too much, especially program-wide, especially those of you who have now gone through the entire program and you've now taken all the classes, if you can provide the input as to what we have focused too much on, perhaps what we haven't focused enough on, where we've met your expectations, where we haven't, and whether this particular class evaluation is the forum to do it, probably isn't. But I would encourage you to take the time and write a candid note to Dr. Forgy towards that end. Because at the end of the day, changes only happen when people provide feedback. Do me a favor. I know it's going to sound really odd. Take this printed material and take it back. I'm no longer imprinting for a reason. The ink is killing me.
Really?
Yeah. So, I went to the bank to pick up some notes the other day. I'm traveling, and I went off when I'm sick. I apologize. But change only happens when people make comments, okay? Constructive, or supportive, okay? So, you've seen good things? Great. Reinforce it. You want to see more? Reinforce it. You, Alex, are the unique person that has actually gone through the old format and the new one. So to the extent that you've got input on a different sort of every other weekend, year and a half, versus every weekend for a year, I think it's important for you to to share that. And whether if you don't think it makes a difference, that's important too. I've got my perspectives as an instructor, but mine's just one. The right answer comes from all of you. I mean, we're here for the students. We're not here for us. So if at the end of the day you all learn, that's what matters. If you all get to meet, get to develop relationships with one another and with other people in the industry, then everybody wins. At the end of the day, all we're doing is sitting here talking and showing PowerPoints and showing you how to do spreadsheets, and then you go away and you never talk to one another, and you didn't meet anybody. There's a lot less value in it. Okay, so I would encourage you to fill those out, and those of you who are completing the program, I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. Forgy and to share your thoughts with him on that. Current events. I didn't bring a lot of current events. There's a lot of stuff going on. Where are interest rates? Where are interest rates today? Where is the 10-year Treasury?
2.2, I think, on Thursday. I can't remember.
2.2 on Thursday. What's door number? Today's Saturday.
I didn't see yesterday, so.
Nobody? Benchmark interest rate that affects the real estate industry. Mr. Gulick, CFO of a development firm. Maybe today, maybe yesterday at 4 o'clock was the time to have fixed, rate on a loan. So I think it's down to 2.09.
Wow.
It's tumbled all week. Yes, sir.
This, Joe, one of the developers, he gave this, it was hot off the press. He just got approved for a $10 million loan, 4.5% interest.
Fixed?
Fixed for the first 6 years.
So, why is that important, at the end of the day?
Hot off the press.
One of the things we talk about in the capital markets classes, we talk about interest rate theory, and we talk about all the different theories that, ultimately help you construct that yield curve. There's no right answer. There's no crystal bubble that tells you where everything is going to be. Ultimately, we need to make decisions, okay? I mean, I've shared with you guys one of the things that I've been short the market for some months. I've been wrong for the most part, but I've made a decision based upon what my intuition is. I feel better today after this week than I felt for a few weeks.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm right, but ultimately, when we're in business, we need to make decisions. Do I develop now, or do I not? Do I fix interest rates, or do I not? And so the decision today is I keep going back to, is what is the upside benefit of staying with variable rates, and what is the upside to fixing rates, right? And so ultimately the perspective is today, how much downside is there with interest rates? If interest rates are if the benchmark rate is at 2, and ultimately when you put all kinds of, risk and, other spreads on top of that, as a real estate operator, you can borrow money for the long term in the 4% range, which is for all practical purposes expected inflation for the next several years, okay? You're basically getting free money.
Right.
You're getting free money, right? As opposed to the risk of how much longer, how much lower can those rates go to how much higher can they go, right? if you stay variable. So, again, I'm not telling you this is going to happen today, I'm not going to tell you it's going to happen tomorrow, but in the long run, the tendency is going to be for rates to increase at some point, right? And when people are piling on, I'm going to use European terms. I asked this in class a few weeks ago, let's see if anybody remembers, the sort of index, the sort of baseline interest rate in European terms is what?
LIBOR?
Try again. In the real estate, well, I say the interest rate, in the credit markets, it's the Bund, it's the German sovereign debt. So instead of the 10-year treasury, it's the 10-year Bund, the government debt, okay, the government bond. What is the 10-year yield on a German government bond today? We talked about this the other day. What is it? We're Americans, so it's got to be worse than ours, right? It's got to be.
1%, right?
It's like 1.1, 1.2%. Forget that. I watch the news from Spain practically every day. Now, a year and a half ago, Spanish sovereign debt was trading at 11, 12% yield. Today, it's at like 1.7, historic lows. You know, country, I don't want to say that it's in the throes of bankruptcy, but a country with 25% unemployment, you know, with declining GDP, with only a 40% participation rate in the employment force, and you're saying, whoa, how the heck do they have? You know, but again, when you see people piling into sovereign debt that way, you know, those are signs of peaks in markets. You know, when everybody's running away from an asset so much and piling into another one, you know, if for no other reason, there's going to be some sort of balance at some point, you know, later on, okay? So I would just encourage you, I don't think we've hit a bottom in interest rates necessarily, but I don't see it going much, much lower. And again, the tendency will be, I love the media. Earlier in the week, all the talk was about the Fed finding ways of signaling that interest rates are going to go up next year without saying it, because it's all sort of telegraphed or whatever. That was Monday. And yesterday we're at 2.09. And it's like everybody's piling into sovereign debt, you know? So, yes, Mark.
How then, you know, because you look at cap rates or what they are today, and you compare different properties and what they're selling at, like with this project we did. How do you then, knowing that, you know, interest rates are so low, but then, you know, we keep thinking it's reached the bottom, then it goes even lower. How do you then, you know, like on a 5-year hold, really sort of intelligently measure what your exit cap is going to be?
Okay. I'm going to defer part of that dialogue to when we actually go over the case later in the session, because I want to focus it to a particular example. You know, the reality is we don't know what interest rates are going to be.
Because that affects your, you know, what your performer looks like, you know, and your...
Yeah, the problem is there's a term in economics that people use, ceteris paribus, all other factors being equal, right? So all other factors being equal, if this, then that. The problem is there is no ceteris paribus in economic terms. So looking at your scenario, right, so if you say today, my expectation is that interest rates are going to go up. If interest rates are going to go up, that means cap rates are going to go up, which means that when I model, I need to model a cap rate that is higher than what I'm going into. That obviously has an impact on your return profile, okay? Now, there are other factors that come into play there, because if interest rates go up, you're typically going to see an inflationary environment. If you see an inflationary environment, what are you going to see? An increase in rents. If you see an increase in rents, what are you likely going to see? An increase in NOI. And so, in a normalized environment, the argument could be made that interest rate fluctuations over a midterm should not materially impact. Okay? Now, I don't know that I totally buy that, okay? I would say that what I would always caution is that buying assets for a mid to short-term hold at historic low cap rates has an inherent risk in it. Okay? Now, I've been saying that for a lot of years, but we've also had, this long slide in interest rates. How much longer we're going to have that, I don't know. But, there is no doubt that mathematically, if you sell at a higher cap than you bought, you're going to have a negative impact on your return profile. So, I want to focus the answer more specifically in the case so we can concretely talk to numbers. But I would always caution people to be conservative in evaluating what exit caps should be, and evaluating what hold periods are on real estate. A friend of mine called me from Spain 2 days ago. So these guys who only calls when he needs something. Okay? Nice guy, but I was like, what does he want? Okay, so I hooked up with him. He's an attorney, he's got a lot of clients. The last time he called, I got 2 kids taking the entrance exam at school now, in a few days. So, but this one is a guy who wants to buy a condo. Listen to this, this is an interesting one. Because I'd like to, so he's got a client that he's been offered to buy. Has anybody heard of this Echo project on Brickell?
Yeah.
So I think it's a company called PMG or something like that, Property Management Group. I think one of our alumni is working there. Isn't Kenny working there? Kenny Farrington? Ring the bell?
I think he left there. I think he's with a smaller company now.
Okay, well that's very telling actually. But so this company bought a site on Brickell. Does anybody know where 14 Brickell is? It's a building that has JP Morgan on top. No, it's right where Brickell makes a turn, right across from St. Jude's Church. Anyway, so it's a Brickell kind of turns like this, and Key Biscayne's down here somewhere, right? So right here, there's 1450 building is right there. So you buy the site right, literally right across the street from the Four Seasons. Okay, so it was a failed Fortune International condo project. I'll tell you that. So the question the guy asked me is, so these people want to buy this. PMG group came and they're building something called Echo Brickell, and they've offered them a unit for $2.5 million for a 150 square meter unit. So, first thing, what's the conversion of a square meter to a square foot?
Calculator says.
But what's the number, roughly? Should know that. We're a global economy. Roughly 11 square feet to a square meter, roughly, right? 3.3 feet to a meter, right? 3.3 feet to a meter, right? So 3.3 times 3.3, or whatever the thing is, what does that come out to?
1650.
3.3 times 3.3?
No, 11.
11.
Yeah, it's like 1,600, whatever the number was, it was like 1,800 square. Whatever the math I came up with, it was like, so they're offering them a unit for $1,300 a square foot. Is that good or bad? So a friend calls you, you gotta sound intelligent. Is that good or bad?
Sounds bad.
Sounds bad?
What are the amenities that are built into this thing?
I don't know. A friend calls you from Jamaica. You just got a master's in real estate in South Florida. They expect you to know these things.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask him what comes with it. What do you
It's
pay
Echo,
for?
it's the Echo building.
Comes with all the bells and whistles.
That's an assumption. I don't know that. I'm going to ask him. What does
Well,
it
you
come
gotta know all the stuff you gotta know all the product that's in the marketplace. So, it's one of these high-end things. It's high-end, has everything. Ton of water, that's the first thing, a ton of water.
That's not
First thing I
underwater.
told him is, it's not underwater. It's not underwater, but that's the first thing. So this guy's in Europe, so the guy's offering him a unit for $2.5 million. And he says, if in 2016, when it's completed, it's not worth $3.5 million? This is what the broker
Wow.
is telling them. If it's not worth $3.5 million bucks, he'll buy it back from them
That's fishy.
for the $2.5 million. And in exchange for that, if it's worth more than 3.5, what's he going to do? He gets the difference. So he gets the upside from there. So the guy says, so as an attorney, says, what do I tell my client? So what do we tell his client? So we did the first part of the analysis. The first part of the analysis is, it's not on the water. Okay, number one, it's not on the water. Number two, is that a good price or not for a condo in Miami, South Florida? Is that good or bad?
It seems high. I don't know that market very well, but $1,300, that's like South Beach prices.
My rent is roughly about $10 a square foot, so. So I don't know about that.
That's
Well,
high.
So I don't know the residential market that well, but what I would tell you is in South Florida, condo prices have gone north of 1,000 square feet, especially on new development. Now, is that where they were 3 years ago? Where were they 3 years ago? $300 a square foot, right? So, you know, the first thing that I say is, I don't know that that's outside the range of what people are asking today, but it's definitely on the high end, number one. And it definitely is much higher than what prices have been. So we've already seen a huge correction in the market, okay? And we also have product that could be bought at less than this that has no development risk associated with it. So the guy wants a condo in Miami, he's got options on stuff he could touch right now,
Right.
as opposed to what's on the come, okay? Number two, that's a 30% increase almost in price in a year and a half. Is that realistic?
Yes?
You think it is?
Yeah.
Is it sustainable?
No.
Especially in the back of what have already been, you know, significant increases. So you should make that. I mean, I wound up saying, listen, tell him to give me the $2.5 million bucks, and I'll promise him something, you know. So that's the next thing, okay? So I don't know that the economics of that are realistic. Okay. Next question. Let's keep going. What are the things? What other things should we be asking here?
Like, how's a broker gonna guarantee?
Okay, so that's so what backstops his guarantee? Who is this guy, and what backstops his guarantee?
What relationship he has with the developer?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but if it's at $1 million, he's not gonna come out of pocket $1.5 million.
Right.
I'm sorry.
If that same.
Yeah, of course not. Right? No, listen. Have you ever heard of? I said to him, it would not surprise me that someone, especially in Miami, would make this type of assertion. But I've never come across one. And it smells fishy. Oh, yeah, no, but it's a great deal. The building's sold out already? The building's sold out, it's just that there's a divorce going on, so it's just he's getting this last opportunity. That's what I'm hearing. Okay, so, all right, so what's the integrity of this guy and what's the value of the guarantee? And how common is this as a business practice? And what's the transparency of this? You know, is this the developer guaranteeing that in the back? Okay, so that's one scheme. Let's keep going. What other questions would you raise? How's he going to pay the $2.5 million bucks? How's he going to pay it? Does anybody know how most condos are being financed in South Florida today? Most, not all.
Prepaid.
Yeah, it's mainly cash deposits, and so typically the capital stack residential for sale typically has a relatively nice profit margin associated with it, more so than single-family home building, but you typically would have seen a capital stack of something like 70% debt, 10% deposits from the buyer, maybe a 10% mezz loan, and 10% developer's equity.
That's what that guy's doing on the Cayman Islands.
Okay, leave this here because this is, no, that's fine. See, so I'm gonna get to that point, okay? So 10% mezz and 10% developer's equity, okay? This is a prototypical South Florida residential, multifamily, for sale, condominium development capital stack. Isn't that what you guys do? Yeah, what do you guys do? Do you do more master plan?
We do all land development, yeah, we do.
Okay.
We're just now getting into vertical.
Okay, all right, okay. So the vertical guys, that's what they historically, in normalized pre-2008 environments, you would have seen. So what does that mean? So you get a bank loan, you get a construction loan here. We've talked about, you know, the characteristics of that. Those of you who've been in some of my other classes, but at the end of the day, buyer's deposits have only financed what? 10%. Why? What's been the typical requirement on most condo developments from a purchase perspective? What do you,
So they typically don't take the draw until they get to the floor that they're building?
No,
Buys the actual unit?
what are you talking about?
Don't they have the new statute out where they can't take, they take the draw on the deposit? Of
No, I'm not talking about new. I'm talking about what's the traditional way that people have bought condominium
10%
product.
down.
Finance.
10 to 20. So typically people would put anywhere from 10 to 20% down payment, right? And by state law on condominiums, what does the developer have an obligation to do?
Escrow.
Escrow how much? Okay, so in the state of Florida, under state of Florida condominium laws, developers have an obligation to escrow deposits up to a minimum of 10% of the purchase price. Beyond that, the developers have the ability to ask the buyers to waive that escrow requirement. And so what has typically been done, okay, is to get 20 if feasible and have the buyer waive the excess escrow. That way you at least comply with state law and still get 10% of cash into the deal to minimize the cost of debt. Because at the end of the day, guess what? That's free money, right? There's nothing like free money, right? Now, if you take this away, and you take mezz debt away, because mezz debt has become seriously expensive, and it's now coming back, but it's now starting to come back, but it disappeared for a long time. So now you got 20% of the cost paid for. How do you build something? And that's where we've reverted to what is very common in Latin America. I guess what this guy is doing in the Caribbean. I know what was being done in the Middle East. The model in Dubai, the explosion in Dubai, was based on or fueled by buyer deposits. So you've got all kinds of different mechanisms that you could use, but ultimately what you're looking for is the buyer to provide 70 or 80% of his purchase price during the construction phase. Okay, now why hasn't that worked in this country? It hasn't worked historically in this country. Why? Because most people finance how much of their house?
Yeah.
70, 80, or 90%. Which means people don't have 70 or 80% of the cost of a house to pay, so guess what? Now, home ownership rates in this country are significantly higher than in most other parts of the world. Why? Because there's a mortgage market, because there's a secondary mortgage market, okay? And because there are government-sponsored entities that have supported those markets that have ultimately made the ability of people to buy homes, you know, feasible. In most parts of the world, who own homes? People that got money. People who have money don't need bank loans, right? So they have the ability to provide a significant sum of money. Plus, it's the business practice in most of these places, okay? So what's happened is, I guess at the Rum Point Club, 10% on contract, 10% on commencement of construction, 20% on completion of the third floor, 20% on completion of the roof, 20% on completion of the interior walls, 20% on closing. I don't know the statute you're talking about, Michael, but my sense would be somewhere in the state of Florida, people have addressed that there has not been a gravitation, especially in South Florida, where most of the development here in these type of is being fueled by outside investors who are accustomed to this type structure, right?
Yeah.
And who have the wherewithal to fund it, to somehow address some sort of buyer protection, okay? But why do I make all this, sort of sidetrack? Because, well, he's got to pay $1 million now. And in this case, it wasn't even targeted to construction. They were saying like $1 million now, $500,000 at some point during the year, and another $500,000 a year from now, and then $500,000 at closing. So with that structure, what's the next question you ask? What's the next question you ask?
Does he have the money to do this?
Does who?
Who's the developer?
My friend? I don't care. He's promised if he doesn't do it, he loses his money. I mean, I would hope, that's very biblical, right? Don't take on your enemy till you know you got more forces than he does, right? Don't sign a contract to pay $2 million if you don't have it, because you're going to lose what you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if my friend is representing the buyer, his concern would be the seller, the developer. What's a concern in a structure like this?
Yeah.
How much
How
are you
how
gonna
stable the developer is.
Will it get completed?
Yeah, right, so you're looking at the stability of the developer, right? You're looking at the stability of the developer, and ultimately, his ability to perform, right? And what are the risks involved with that? So, the first thing is who is this developer? Who is PMG? Who is PMG? You know, the largest developer in South Florida now, they got like 20 projects announced or something crazy like that. Who are these guys? Where are they from? They're from New York. What do you mean, what does that mean? That means a lot.
That
Why
means
aren't
they're
they-
stable
Why didn't they
individuals.
just, why didn't you stay up there? You know, no. I mean, no, I'm serious. Who are these guys, right? So, what about, let's take a look at the history of the site. So it was a troubled condo that Fortune International couldn't get off the ground. I happen to know because I did a little bit of background on this one some time ago. So Fortune's going to lose, in fact, had lost the site. These couple Venezuelan brothers bought it, and they're just going to hold it. One day these guys knocked on the door from PMG and said, we want to buy this for $50 million. And I said, okay. They gave them, they said, give me $2 million now, we'll hold it for 6 months. And this was last spring, and then they closed in the summer. So essentially what they had was the opportunity to go out and market the condo. So they presumably gone out and marketed the condo. They closed on it. So they own the site now. That I know. So my question to you is if a condo is fully sold, as has been asserted in this case, in today's environment, why don't they have any bank financing? I mean, we read the other day, Brookstone provided a $400 million construction loan in Miami Beach to somebody. Why couldn't these people get a construction loan? I don't know the answer to that, but it doesn't speak well to it, right?
How do you know they don't have one? Because it's not being built?
Well, one,
All
right,
financed.
because nothing's happened, number one, and number two, because they're selling, being financed by contracts. Now, what are the other signs? What are developers? They're like cowboys, So you get these guys that come down here from New York, and all of a sudden, they announce 20 projects. Do they have the manpower to do this? Who are the people that are doing this? At the end of the day, what's their capacity to do this stuff? Can they deliver? But wait, the reason I know all this stuff, I know about the contract because I know these Venezuelan guys, and the only reason I found all this stuff out was because some people that I know were asked to finance another deal that these guys wanted to buy. So I started digging around, and I go, wait a minute, these guys are buying like all these, and it's all like, I don't want to say it's a Ponzi scheme, but it's other people's money. So, you know, they were going to buy another site a couple blocks away with no equity in the deal. Here, I don't know ultimately how they got the deal financed. My guess is they got some sort of land loan or mezz loan from somebody based on the contracts that they were able to execute. But now they got the land tied up, they can't get a construction loan without paying off the land, okay? So, you know, my question right now is, I don't know if these guys can do it. That's problem number one. Stability, financial stability, ability to perform, right? The people that they have going. Let's talk about another, how is this capital stack now constructed? What happened in Dubai in 2008? Do you guys remember pictures of all these cranes? I went to Dubai in 2008.
I went to Qatar in 2008.
Did you see, I don't know,
There's cranes everywhere.
okay, so I know in Dubai there were all these cranes with half-built buildings. Why? What happens if all of a sudden what happens if this crazy market all of a sudden regulates? I'm not saying it's going to go back to $300 a square foot. What happens if all of a sudden this building is worth $1,000 a square foot? Are you going to keep making deposits?
No, exactly. Everybody bails.
First rule of real estate, right? You don't put good money after bad. Made a bad decision, be a man, suck it up, and go. Right? So, what's the ability of everybody else to perform? And what's his ability to deliver if everybody else stops performing? Right? So, you know, that's why I said, listen, give me the money and I'll find something to do with it, you know. But, you know, look at all the things that you could touch on with just one question that somebody can ask.
Are there examples of that sort of model where it's just like really being financed by owners working?
Yeah, there's, I mean, listen, most of what is proposed or coming out of the ground in South Florida is working under this model. My guess is
very little debt financing.
it would not. I mean, listen, whatever was built between 2000 or announced and gotten off the ground from 2008 till probably sometime early this year is working under this model. So, I mean, we had a student here, Mike Smith, who in 2008, 2009, actually bought something like this. It's almost completed now. I think I've told this story in Brickell, a couple blocks behind here. So he came and asked me, he said, look, my grandparents left me some money, I want to move out of the house, and I got this deal, and I said, you know, Michael, look, you're pissing money away. Buy something. If you want, buy something. But no, I think he's going to make a lot of money, whatever. Well, long story short, it seems like it's worked out well. You know, he bought it $200-something, $300 a square foot. The guy's gotten it off the ground. And then somebody told me the other day that he was quoted in some newspaper article, and he said, you know, my professor at the Nova Southeastern School said I was a fool, but now I'm making all this money because I'm flipping a deal, blah, blah, blah. Okay. I mean, dude, okay, you got lucky. Okay, I'd rather be good. I'd rather be lucky than good. So, but I think there's definitely, at the end of the day, in a diligence class, what are we talking about? Mitigating risk.
Right.
So, if a friend who's an attorney is calling me to ask me about something and he has no idea, he's 5,000 miles away, I need to expose all the risk. Now, if ultimately within the context of a portfolio, you can risk losing $2.5 million, do it. Do it, you know. Then you get into the other issues of jurisdictions. You're a foreign national. You get caught in a long lawsuit to try to get money, enforceability. What's the deal with any of that stuff, you know? So, just along those lines, the only thing that I don't really have this thing, anything that really add is, there was an article that was a checklist in the Journal of Accountancy this month regarding doing due diligence in China. And their whole issue was that, so it wasn't industry specific, it was more country specific, and I would say the same thing, real estate, to the extent that you go outside this country, you should never assume that the baseline or the working environment or the rules of engagement or the business customs and practices are the same ones that you would encounter here. Okay, I don't want to make value judgments. I don't want to say the way we work in this country is better than in others. I would say generally, if you take a look at, there's people that every year publish transparency and business practices issues or rankings. You know, this is one of the more transparent and least corrupt environments to do business in. But, you know, we got governors in jail here, and we got mayors in jail, and, you know, there were guys today that got, was a Miami Herald headline today, 3 cops and 2 public service aides taking kickbacks from tow truck companies, you know, so we got corruption everywhere, okay, but interesting. Questions. Find out whether the Chinese company is keeping multiple sets of books. In real estate, you could find that in this country, especially to the extent that you have a business that has a fair component of cash involved in it. So maybe that's more operating type businesses, you know, a public storage environment, a hotel, you know, where, you know, a golf course, an amusement park of some kind, you know, where there's a real estate operation underneath an operating business. Are people really keeping 2 sets of books? An apartment building, Class C, where tenants pay you in cash. I used to work for a guy, the first guy I worked for in the graphic arts industry owned a bunch of apartments on South Beach. And this, you know, these were the old ones that had Plan 8 and all that stuff. Most of these people paid in cash. And his whole lifestyle was cash driven, okay? I mean, none of that stuff got declared. Right, wrong, or indifferent. I mean, I had nothing to do with that, but that's how he lived his business. So in his example, there were definitely 2 sets of books. You want to buy that, how do you diligence that? How do you substantiate cash flow? Okay, so questions on that. You know, figure out working capital. Figure out how people pay, how people don't pay. You know, a friend of mine's son, another friend of mine's son, called me the other day. He runs a business that he runs an American operation that distributes waterworks. Underground, yeah. All, you know, all underground. Sorry? All that stuff, right. It's a Canadian firm, he runs a South Florida branch. They wanted to sell it, he wants to buy it. So he calls me, Coach, how do I, because he used to coach with me too, he used to coach our quarterbacks. Coach, how do I do this? So, you know, like, send me a statement, let's walk through this stuff. First thing is, no, our customers are all good. We, you know, our average day sales outstanding is only like 84 days. But you're in bad shape, you know, because the only way you can finance this is with a bank loan on your inventory and your receivables. You're not going to get any credit. If your average DSO is 84 days, that means you got a bunch of stuff that's outside your borrowing base. You're not going to get this done. So you got to understand how cash works. And remember, cash rules. You got cash, you can be alive. You can be bankrupt, but if you got cash, you can still buy lunch, okay? Tax concerns in different jurisdictions. Tax law is different in every jurisdiction. Tax law is different in different jurisdictions in the U.S. So understand, you go do business in Georgia, you go do business in New York, understand the tax implications of what you do. Be attentive to related party transactions. You know, you were saying, was this guy related to the developer? I think the assumption when you go to somewhere other than where your customer working is, who's behind this name? You know, who's really the guy I'm doing business with, okay? Yeah, and then the other one is, you know, there were several ones here. Set expectations for corporate governance in advance. So, because people don't always work the same way in other jurisdictions, you know, you need to make sure that when you buy a business or you buy an asset and you bring your management on, that you push down whatever your ethical expectations are, okay? So, after you buy something, if, you know, there's been a guy managing it, and he takes cash and you don't want cash, make sure you know that up front. I saw a guy I used to work for at a funeral a few weeks ago, and this guy fired me. This is the only guy's ever fired me in my life. We still have a great relationship. I mean, he fired me, I stayed working with him for about 6 months, but you know. But the last fight we had was, there was a guy who worked for me who used to take care of all the recycled paper. We used to sell, we had a large plant, and we would sell upwards of $300,000–400,000 a year of waste paper to a recycling plant. And the guy used to bring that in cash. So when I started there, it was a couple $1,000. And eventually I changed to one supplier, I changed to another supplier, and we started getting more money. We were getting screwed, you know, so you get more money. And I told the guy, no cash. You gotta bring a check. Because one, I have a responsibility, accountability-wise, to record that in the company. And second of all, I don't want that money disappearing. So, who used to get the cash? When it was cash, the owner. See, don't mess with the owner's cash, okay? But I said, Joe, no problem. Dude, we'll raise your salary. No, then I gotta pay taxes on it. Joe, I'll get you the money, don't worry about it. No, whatever. So, I said, no, we have to do business this way. So, he went behind my back and went to the guy and said, get cash. And I went to the guy, I called the supplier and said, I don't care what he says, you gotta pay us in checks or whatever, you know, I was insubordinate, whatever. Long story short, a year later, I'm in Chicago, and I meet with one of the VPs in the company. So I'd left by this point, I'm in Chicago, I'm running another company, I go to the trade show, I meet one of the executives of the company, and he says, hey, we got rid of Campa, because the guy had a huge cocaine problem, and apparently he was giving Joe half the cash that he was getting. And we were never able, you know, like, hey, can you help us? We're trying to get our hands around how much he really stole. I can't tell you, but it's cash. So you never want cash in a business, because it disappears. Okay, so I'm going to take 2 minutes. I'm going to take 2 minutes, and if I could have somebody's help, and publicly, disclose the bids. Okay, so I need somebody to come over here and you know what? I think I can do this. So, Gulick.
That clear now?
22,091,091.
Can you write them on the board?
If you want to, yes.
You the one that volunteered.
Oh, your best handwriting. Go write them on.
I said if you want to, yes.
See it.
Grab one right here. Please accept this. This is the Venezuelan guy. Is there any cash in here for me? You're never going to win this bid.
How much was Alex?
22,091.
22,091. So Maroso bids 22,500,000.
Oh, not 25. One. This is why I should be up here already.
Got it?
Can y'all see?
Nicola, I don't have a letter from you.
Unfortunately, I didn't do it in the letter form.
You didn't do a letter.
It's on the front page. It's on the front page.
That's the second page.
Wasn't there a requirement for a bid letter to be submitted?
I did not see that, unfortunately. I didn't see it.
Okay, we're gonna circle
This
that
might not
bid.
be
I
your
don't
last
know if
pass.
this bid is gonna be accepted. We're gonna circle this bid.
It's fine, we don't really want it. Who's next?
Reed has, I think this is important to put up there, please. $22,372,808.82.
That's what mine looks like.
That's what mine looks like.
Hey, it is what it is.
Very specific.
Can you please circle that with a different color, because that's non-conforming. Basically, you're executing yourself.
No problem. What we got, 3 more hours? We almost there.
Nice little envelope. What's in there?
Leo.
Why did we even go?
I think I was wrong.
I don't know, I mean, this looks really official, but I don't see a...
It's in the middle. It's in the
Oh, now we know what it is.
21 million. $730. $217,335 with 86 cents.
Who's that?
Me.
De pena. Da pena.
Peña.
Well, why didn't you put Peña then?
Because I don't know the keystroke to the E.
Alt 164.
Wow.
Alt 164.
I'll forget it. tomorrow.
Don't forget
Write it
it.
down.
Alt 164.
Write it down.
It's your name.
No, actually in the military they didn't put it, so then I have to keep everything the same.
I know, but now you're not in the military. Alt 164.
Just write it down.
At least you learned something in the program. I mean, you know.
If nothing
Oh,
happens.
164.
I'm not suggesting you haven't learned other things. I'm just saying Frederick Jackson. Jackson Team LLC.
$26, even.
26 million? Why? Sounds really high.
Sold.
I'm gonna buy it from you out of foreclosure next year.
Okay.
He never told you what he read, so I don't know.
26 million, right?
I never told you what.
Jackson, 26 million. Understand this typically would not be done publicly. So, now, it could be done publicly to the extent that there is a public bid involved. Alex was involved in a bid to the city of West Palm Beach a few weeks ago related to a development opportunity on a parcel of land that the city owns. That would be done publicly. But on an existing asset between private sellers and private buyers, no. Is there any money in here for me?
That's a pretty thick one.
Shake it out.
I just put it back.
Michael Cohn. Again, there's no bid letter here.
Needs another color under it.
So you need a different color. We're gonna put the number 23 405 554.
Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
It's like a couple you guys are coming back for some more classes.
No, we will not be.
Saunders, Saunders, and Saunders.
Robert. All about Robert.
Awesome.
Something about that though,
Sounds like a
sound like
legal team,
Robert.
man.
It's an LLC, guys.
Something about that
The
though.
problem is I see that my check in the amount of 10% is enclosed and I don't see that.
It's in the mail.
It's in the mail.
20 million.
Flat?
20 million, round number.
I was worried that maybe I should put in the background, like, this is not a real bid
This is not a real bid?
for educational purposes
For
only.
educational purposes only.
That's why I didn't put the check in there.
A fake check to the void on that.
Kitson, 22.5.
So we got Justin, Dylan,
Anderson LLC,
Justin.
21. 733, 585. Branker. $22,582.
We done?
No, not yet.
No, Dylan.
Relax.
I'm just trying to figure out who's missing.
You don't sign letters?
You know what, I had another one that I signed and I changed it. I forgot to sign it.
.901 Gables Court, Shachter, 21,750. We have two gentlemen who missed the cutoff. Do you want to, at least for illustrative purposes, be considered?
Two S's. Two S's.
Mr. Baloo?
Do I write them in red?
Thank you, sir.
You knew somebody who needs to know you guys. That's all I need to know.
D-A-R-Y-L, Darryl? D-R-Y-L?
Yeah, D-A-R-Y-O-U.
Okay, this is for the others, but did you?
Yeah, it's on your,
Okay. Okay, thank you. Dylan, 22, 583, 533.
What's Darryl? Oh, there we go.
But Daryl, do you have a number, or do I use the number that you used in your submission?
yeah, it's in my submission. But I wrote it on the paper as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Oh, I see. 22-3.
Guess I underbid.
Somewhere in there. No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Price is somewhere in there.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Can you read? I have no business writing on the board.
I mean, I made my price.
Really?
Say something else.
Horrible.
I kid like that.
Really? No, I'm not blind, that's why it's that big. Who's 26?
Right in the
Fred.
green line. And
Freddie.
Fred.
Fred's a high roller.
I got you marked out.
They don't think,
You're not from this country?
they don't think you're gonna close
I'm gonna highlight Fred's bid real quick.
So they do it in Jacksonville.
Can I highlight it in the red, Fred? So we know?
No,
Fred said it's all cash too.
Oh, it's all, oh. I should definitely highlight it in red then.
Hey, sit down somewhere.
All cash? No. That deserves to be highlighted in the red. That's very suspicious.
okay. That was the lowest. That was
You're the lowest, where are you?
A bank letter?
Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Bank letter?
Committee?
proof of funds.
Yeah, proof of funds, huh?
Every money, my man, it's all good. Proof of funds.
Yeah,
Very
very
good.
money.
Okay, we'll come back, I'm gonna leave that there, we're gonna come back to that in a second. We're gonna do a couple other things first. The instructions, the assignment were clear, and it required two different things. Some of you weren't sure about it, asked for clarification. So there were two requirements. One was to submit a memo or a document, a summary memo, an investment case documenting your analysis of, how you arrived at a particular value. The second one was to provide a sealed bid, response to, participate in a contest to be named one of the 3 finalists in our class session today. So, towards that end, I would have expected that from all of you. And so, some of you saw it, I got memos, I didn't get a bid. The only things that I would say, and I want to, it wasn't the only one, there were a couple of very nice ones here, but I want to pull Mark's just out for a second. Alyssa's was very similar. Frederick, you used which was interesting, you used a residential sales contract, which would not typically apply in a commercial transaction. And there's a bunch of verbiage and terms and conditions, and that really is a contract. And all I want is a letter of intent, or a letter of offer. And ultimately, all I wanted was, here's my bid, done the analysis, put in writing. I offer 22 million, whatever. I'm willing to put so much down. I'm willing to make comments on a purchase-sale agreement, I'm willing to put it in escrow. What typically would be, you put a timeline on it, right? So, you guys can do searches on the internet too, right? You can go to bosses, you can go to people that you've worked with, hey, have you ever submitted a bid? But typically, when you put a bid, you want a fuse on it. You don't want it open-ended because, okay, so I make a bid to you. I'll pay you $22,500. What are you going to do with that bid? You're going to go and tell Michael, hey, if you give me more than $22,500, right, then I'll sell it to you. What I want to do is put a short fuse on you and prevent you from going around and shopping stuff around, okay? Plus, ultimately, I want you to just get off the pot, and do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll put a trigger on it. Yes, sir.
That's not really the case on this though, because they're inviting you to bid and they're gonna take the highest bid and they're
Yeah,
gonna.
but you would still, where I was gonna go is, you wanna put a timeline on it, you wanna ask them to accept it. What's gonna happen is, realistically, is you'll go beyond the date you put on it, and you'll probably still be interested, and nobody's gonna sign that stupid little piece of paper for you. But ideally, when you make an offer to somebody, right, you want them to accept it, right? and you want a certain timeline in which you can withdraw it. You don't want open-ended offers out there.
But isn't a letter of intent non-binding anyways?
Well, you could say all of that stuff, right? I mean, you know, you can. I've got an example of a couple that I.
I didn't have to get up till 8. Oh, good.
And in this case too, wouldn't the due diligence period already be typically over since everything was provided?
In a case like this, yes. So you typically, in a case, I thought I brought over a couple of, oh, I know. Let me get it from here.
Yeah, I was considering putting in like contingencies, but in research it was like, hey, this is already, you did your diligence,
Well,
so.
we already got the.
No, listen, no, so we're gonna go over a couple of things. So, stop to think, and I'm gonna show you something now. But in real estate, and in transactions that are done on an institutional level in which an asset is taken out to bid, and a data room is set up, and people are given time, typically what happens is, so it's timeline typically. You're gonna have about 30 days to do diligence, okay? We talked about it, you're gonna spend money, you're gonna make a bid. Sometime within 3 to 5 days, you're gonna be invited to, if you're a finalist, you're gonna be invited to up it, and then at that point, they're gonna talk, and they're gonna agree on a guy, and then you're gonna have like 5 days to enter into a purchase sale agreement. And one of the considerations in that purchase sale agreement, at the point of the discussion with the finalist, they'll already give you the purchase sale agreement they're willing to sign. And they'll say, when we talk to you, you gotta tell us in writing what your comments are gonna be to that contract. So part of their decision is, what's the most efficient price, what's the source of funds and the ability to get there, and what do I have to be, you know, what are they gonna ask me to represent, okay? And that's going to be stipulated in the purchase sale agreement, including when you're willing to close. So typically what will happen is the day you sign the purchase sale agreement, you're already done with your diligence. There typically will not be any contingencies, and typically what you'll just have is a period of time between 15 and 30 more days in order to line up your financing and get your operations in hand. So we're talking about a 60 to 75 day period from when an asset goes on the market to when it's closed. And you're looking at the top half. Dylan, come on, man. I feel like I'm in high school, you know? Come on. Sit, enjoy, relax, learn. Come on, no goofing around. 30 days roughly to do diligence, and 30 days to, about 10 days to get the contract done, and about 15 to 30 days max to get the deal completed, okay? This is, let me find a letter of intent. I did a, so, I just did this for this. You can't see that, can you? Let me download it. No, that's the wrong letter. Damn. Okay, so I just tried to, I was kind of sick, and and again, this is a business, an operating business, more so than an asset, okay? But in that particular case, it's different. In a traditional middle market M&A transaction, you typically make a bid, and then when it's accepted, you hopefully are dealing with people of substance. You've got a period of 45 days during which, one, you're doing diligence, until you're entering into a purchase sale agreement, okay? But again, you send it out, and then, in their cases, you get 45 days, and then 45 days after the PSA, you put so much in escrow, right? Things you're looking for, exclusivity, okay? It's non-binding, back to your point. Typically, LOIs are non-binding, okay? But typically, you're gonna want people to do this, sign it. Now, reality is you almost never see an LOI signed. People agree verbally, and then they'll go and start drafting a purchase sale agreement, okay? So, but, you guys can, you can pull this stuff down on the internet anytime, so. Speaking of purchase, so anyway, that probably would have been a better submission, and a simple letter would have sufficed for this. I appreciate the printing of the summary memo, but it wasn't what was called for this morning, okay?
Would you typically submit a proof of funds or?
Unless it's asked for, no. Somebody may ask for it. Typically, so I don't want to jump start, the decision, because I'm going to go through that in a little bit. But, so, look at this range. I think we talked about the other day that typically it was somebody that was like way the hell out on the upper end. Somebody way the heck down on the lower end. Okay, and there actually was,
25.
that actually wasn't her number. Her number was 21. That was what, so, whether it's a typo or not, okay? So, there was actually even a typo there, but on the range, really high, really low, and then a bunch of people sort of, close to one another, right? So hopefully that means that in this class, we've kind of identified, what common techniques are, and again, we'll go through the case. Now, I want to just go back. I sent you guys, after our last class, I sent you 3 or 4 checklists. I sent you my checklist, I sent you Nachi's checklist, I sent you one that I'm going to go over from an engineering firm that does, third-party property inspections and environmental assessments, so that you've got some tools to take back with you. I'm not going to go over those. In addition to that, I sent an article from an attorney at a law firm in Minneapolis called Maslin. And this is an article that the previous instructor of this class used to use. And what I like about it, and the reason I want to go over it is I have focused primarily on an economic assessment of an existing building, more so than in a review of a development project. And when you have a development project, you've got a series of different type items that you need to focus on. Then you're not just buying cash flow there, you're buying a dream, right? And that dream has a whole bunch of other components to it. So I at least want to highlight some of these points. I sent it to you, you have it, so it should be helpful. Now, the first one we've gone over, phase 1. So it starts with environmental. Where are we at, right? Does that trigger a need to have a subsequent evaluation, which is a phase 2? Does that phase 2 require remediation or further action? Okay, so in development projects, that is probably more of a concern than with existing assets. Okay, existing assets probably have had those issues addressed already and remediated, or in the process of remediation, or identified with no need to further remediate. Okay, what are some things that you find, especially in redevelopment opportunities? Asbestos. So asbestos, what does that give rise to? Either a need to remove it, which is highly costly, or to abate it somehow, right? So again, what's asbestos? It was a chemical compound used extensively in construction in this country up until mid-70s maybe? Don't you do that kind of stuff? Is it, or you don't do asbestos?
Not asbestos, but yeah, it's a.
Okay, so it was used in like mastic, I mean, it's used in a lot of different, uses in construction up until 72, 73, something in that range, found to be toxic, highly, it's carcinogen. So you don't want that stuff. And if you've got to, so it was used in insulation, it was in a lot of stuff, so it's very expensive to remove or abate, okay? But a consideration. USTs and ASTs, underground storage tanks and above ground storage tanks. What's that typical of? Typical of gas stations or former gas station sites, and retail big, because where were gas stations? Corners. So you've got that, and you've got any other use that had any sort of generation. So what you had backup generator or whatever, you typically had some sort of tank. You don't see that in South Florida that often, one, because of the water table, and two, you don't see a lot of heating tanks down here. But up north, everybody's got a heating tank, and it's typically underground somewhere. So just something to be concerned. What's the risk with that? Groundwater contamination. There's been a leak, or the fuel tank hasn't been appropriately removed, okay? Above ground, it's the same thing. You see that here in South Florida more often, and that is spills when you're filling, spills when you're, taking out, spills because of damage. So the fact that a tank is above ground doesn't eliminate or remove any concern that you may have, especially with the groundwater or the soil underneath where that above ground tank is stored. Lead paint. Again, lead paint was, lead was used in paint up until the late 70s. Probably more of a residential issue, especially with older homes and with kids. And the big problem when I was growing up was kids eating the paint off the wall and getting sick. Probably less of a concern. Mold. What does the mold expert tell us about mold?
Yeah, there's gold in mold. No, it's a new asbestos.
Okay, so especially in South Florida, where there's a lot of humidity, where there's a lot of water intrusion, there's a lot of water intrusion in areas that you don't see visually, right? You've got furniture, you've got, stuff fixed to the wall, all of a sudden you remove it, and you got stuff festering and growing back there, and you get respiratory issues associated with it, and so, especially in South Florida, mold, mildew, etc. Environmental operating permit. So a lot of times, I think that's probably less of a concern today, but anytime that you have tanks, you typically need to have. So you need to register with regulatory authorities. Environmental matters are handled by 3 layers of environmental authorities in this country. So federal law has a regulatory and enforcement agency called the EPA, which stands for what?
Environmental Protection.
The Environmental Protection Agency. And so they cover a certain range of things. In Florida, what do you have? State law governs environmental matters through what agency?
It's the FPA.
Yeah.
It's changed names, so I don't want to misquote it. No, it's like the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Florida Department of Corrections. Florida Department, so I said Florida Department of Environmental Protection, okay? It used to be DOP, but, and then locally, you've got, well, it's Durham and Dade County. Dade Environmental Resource Management, I don't know what it's called here, but what's it called here?
I don't know what it's called.
Okay, so in Broward County, there's one. And typically what happens is, I'm sorry?
It's called firm.
I didn't say that.
Maybe it would be called Broward Environmental Resource, I have no idea. But typically what happens is, the 3 layers of agencies will distribute the regulatory authority depending on the type of use and depending on the size. I'm not an expert in any of this, but for example, I would tell you, big industrial users would typically be covered by EPA. And certain uses would be covered by EPA. Air emissions. A local agency doesn't have the ability or the staff to monitor air emissions. So if you're a factory, if you're a printing company where you have a heat tunnel that bakes the ink in on the paper and shoots out part of what's been baked, which are volatile organic compounds that are going into the air, you need to get EPA permits because you're putting X amount of tons of contaminants into the air. So air emissions typically are dealt with by EPA. Large users, groundwater contamination, any large user of chemical is going to be governed here. The state is going to set the tempo for most of the regulation that's going to impact the developer. Ultimately, they're going to have jurisdiction over groundwater,